I do want to start with wide receivers with you, Fran, because our friend Jory Epstein, I saw, she's at Yahoo now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not USA Today.
Yahoo.
Said in talking to some NFL people that a lot of people see sort of 4 wide receivers total. And I bet this means grading, not getting picked, but in the first 2 rounds, like 2 in the first, 2 in the second. And I don't think that's crazy because I want 1 of 4 receivers in this draft if I want to feel really good. But how do you see this wide receiver class? If it's a team like the Cowboys who desperately wants their second best receiver, do you agree that that's sort of limited to 4 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's probably going to be more guys that go in round 2. I think there are more names called, but in an ideal world, I think that teams would love it if there was a little bit more talent this year. I think we've gotten kind of accustomed to the fact that we've said, oh, there's wide receivers every year. This year, it's a little bit down. There's not that true, but unless you count Travis Hunter, there's not that true like blue chip guy at the top that everybody universally is excited about. Look, Tetairoa McMillan, he's a certain kind of player, but he's really good at that skill set that he's got, right? And that's big body. He's never going to put the ball on the ground. You're going to line him up and feel good. He may not be that consistent big play threat in the NFL, but if you're looking for a reliable, really strong number 2 to pair with a dynamic option like a CD Lamb, you could do worse than T-Mac. You could do worse than McMillan.
Fran, talking about and keeping on the theme of T-Mac, the reports have come out and they've been a little bit kind of up and down the scale about what he ran in his 40. He put out a
4.36, baby.
He put out a kind of abbreviated sort of I don't even know what do you really call it, video of him running the 40. Yeah, the mixtape. It was a mixtape of a 40. If the time was slower, does that drop him some in the draft, or is still like turn on the film, this is what it is, game speed and 40 speed don't really matter to me?
Yeah, I think that every person, every evaluator, every team is going to feel a little bit differently about that, Jesse. And I think at the end of the day, you don't watch Tetairoa McMillan on film and see a guy, oh man, like this guy's going to be a breakaway threat in the NFL. He's going to consistently threaten people vertically down the field. All the various 40 times that are out there, it's always funny, and it happens every single spring. Obviously, the agent and the player will want the fastest times possible out there. Whereas, look, at the end of the day, every team is going to have their time that boots on the ground got. Then basically what happens is after when the whole pro day is over, all the scouts that are in attendance, everybody that took a time, all get together, they huddle up off to the side, and they say, okay, what's the most common time amongst all of us? That's going to be the universal number that will go on the sheet that is distributed to all 32 teams and to the CFL and to all the other leagues. But at the end of the day, teams most often are going to go with the time that they've got on their watch. And at the end of the day as well, you might have a 40 from the combine, a 40 from the pro day, a 40 from last spring. Maybe you have them run a 40 again at some point during like a private workout or something. Whatever the best time is from that number, that's what's going to go on the card, right? So there's all kinds of 40s that are going to be out there, all kinds of times. But it's that time of year, the silly season, where they're going to get conflicting reports left and right.
Fran, at the end of the day, the Cowboys are going to have to take a running back at some point in this draft, right? Mel Kiper's mock for a second straight mock Omarion Hampton to the Cowboys. Is he a first rounder at this point? And if the Cowboys don't get Hampton in the first round, if he goes, who are some backs they can get in the second or third round?
I do think that Hampton ends up in the first round. I do. He's an awesome player. Now, 12 might be a little rich for my blood, for Hampton, but I would not fault them necessarily for the decision. I would just say, you probably could have gotten some better value at some different spots. But I think when you're looking at Hampton, he's got that ability to be that foundation ball carrier. The player that he reminds me of is the NFL version of David Montgomery. The Montgomery coming out of Iowa State was a third round pick by the Chicago Bears. But when you're looking at what he's become in the NFL, he has that ability to be that lead dog in a backfield, has that ability to be a true 3-down presence. And I look at that with Hampton. Now, I think at the end of the day, you're probably a little bit closer to like the tier 3 end of it. I know some people say, he's right there with Jeanty. Some people have him ahead of Jeanty. I'm not quite there yet. I'm going to put Jeanty a tier ahead of Omarion Hampton, but I think at the end of the day, there are plenty of backs that Dallas could settle up with here when you get to round 2, when you get to round 3. Certainly, Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State is probably the closest in terms of skill set when you look at Omarion Hampton, and he's more of that grinder between the tackles, bigger body. There are some red flags with the profile with Judkins, mainly that so much of his yardage over the course of his career, not necessarily just last year at Ohio State, but over the course of his career, have come against light boxes. And when you look at the history of backs, that the volume of yards and the volume of carries that have come against light boxes, that's a tough needle to thread for guys that have found NFL success. But he is a big back who's got explosive traits. He's got a lot of tread on the third. He's got a lot of wear and tear on those tires. He's been a 3-year starter at 2 big programs. So Judkins is another name certainly to keep in mind. And then I would say the other one would be Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I've compared him in the past to a DeMarco Murray, in terms of what he can be from like a height, weight, speed standpoint, more of like a stretch zone. Get him on a track. Let him be a one-cut guy. That's what he was at Iowa, and I think that's the kind of system, the kind of situation that would benefit him most in the NFL.
Fran, we talked so much about the 12th pick, but I'm just kind of curious, as the scouting process goes on, as you're talking to people, is there a name that just kind of keeps coming back to you that's a little bit later in the draft where you're like, man, I like this guy? And is there a guy later in the draft where like, you know what, like I see Dallas Cowboy with him. There's something about him that fits the profile, whether it's 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I just think that he ends up with a star in his helmet. I'm just kind of curious, maybe 2 different questions, but curious what your thoughts are on those.
No, and it's good stuff there. I think when you're looking at players that at terms of 12, where I'm like, man, like this one makes a ton of sense to me. We talked last week about Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. I think he checks a lot of the boxes, more so than most teams. I should say less so with most teams. The Cowboys, when you look at their first round picks, they don't target like plus athletes, plus speed profiles, guys where it's like, oh man, like they really looked outstanding at the combine. That hasn't really been the profile of a lot of the guys that they've taken in the first round, again, compared to the rest of the NFL. So I don't think that they're going to get scared off by bad testing from a guy like Tyler Booker. I know that's going to knock him for some people. I don't think that would be the case for Booker. So that's one that certainly stands out. I think when you look at the corner from Michigan, I think that he certainly has a skill set that would make a lot of sense. Jeff, I know you've talked about how when Matt Eberflus got hired, and he's like, yeah, we've got 2 great corners. He's like, do you though? Are you sure?
Who are they?
Are you sure about that? In terms of the health and durability of both Bland and Diggs. So, I think when you're looking at a couple of those guys at 12, I think Walter Nolan we've talked about. I think he makes a lot of sense. So between Will Johnson, Tyler Booker, and Walter Nolan, those are 3 names that kind of stand out to me for the Cowboys at 12. And then I think when you're looking into day 3 of the draft, there are so basically I keep a spreadsheet, guys, of all 32 teams, and just kind of peg like, all right, who are some players that kind of fit each team's profile, and who are ones that make sense, and I'll hit on that as I go through as we get a little bit closer. I'll do my 7-round mock and some team specific things, but just looking at my notes right now, some guys that kind of make sense for me, that check a lot of the boxes that would make sense once you get into day 3. I mentioned Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa. I think he makes a lot of sense. Look, they plucked a number of college coaches here in this cycle when they brought in the new staff. So I think you're looking at a number of these Oregon players. You're looking at some Kansas State. I think there's going to be a lot of connections here to some players that that you're drafting here in those mid to late rounds that would make some sense here for the Cowboys.
Fran, we lost Cooper Rush, and so we're in a tight spot over here.
Sorry.
And Ian Rappaport, he was talking reckless. He got a little big man energy about when the Cowboys might draft a quarterback in this draft. Once you move beyond 2-parter, is Jackson Dart about to be a first-round pick? Because I just saw him in Jeremiah and Kuiper's mock drafts. And how many names are there in this draft that play quarterback that you could see as I'd say 3rd round or later that teams are going to like as potentially he could turn into an NFL dude?
I actually think this is a really good class for backup quarterbacks. It's just that a backhanded compliment maybe to this group, but I think it's actually a really good class for backups. For a number of these players, I think you can look at and say, yeah, I don't know if I love his starting upside. Like I look at Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, and I'm like, I I don't see him as a future starter. I don't think that he's got that ideal skill set. But in terms of like the athleticism, the intangibles, everything you hear about him all off the field, but then also like what he has shown on the field, there are so many backup quarterbacks in today's game where that's the skill set. And I think I feel really good about Riley Leonard's ability to come in and handle that. Will Howard from Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, Kyle McCord from Syracuse. You talk about other players like Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers, where the upside is there to become a starter down the line. But if not, like I feel good about their ability to stick as a backup. Tyler Shuck from Louisville, he's got a really high floor. I think he's got starting upside as well, but the floor is there. So I think that there are going to be options there to kind of fill your pockets when you lose a Cooper Rush. But look, the quarterback class, not rich at the top, but when you get to the middle and late rounds, I think there are going to be options there for teams.